The sea has always held its secrets. It is a graveyard of forgotten vessels, a resting place for those lost to its depths. But some ships do not sink. They drift, carrying stories that should have never been told. And when the cargo ship Providence Dawn was found abandoned in the North Atlantic, the world turned its attention to the mystery that would soon unravel in ways no one could have predicted. It was a clear morning when the Coast Guard received the distress call. A signal, weak and fragmented, bouncing through the waves like a whisper from the dead. The transmission was garbled, distorted by static and something else, something that made the hairs on the back of the receiver's neck stand on end. A voice, barely human, muttered only a few words before vanishing. It sees. It knows. We are not alone. The signal cut off, leaving only silence in its wake. No coordinates. No further communication. Just a voice slipping into oblivion. The authorities scrambled to trace the origin, and within hours, a reconnaissance plane spotted the Providence Dawn, drifting without direction. No crew. No signs of struggle. Just an eerie, lifeless hulk swaying with the tide. A team was dispatched, led by Captain Eric Mathers, a veteran of maritime recovery operations. Alongside him were his first mate, Lawson, marine biologist Dr. Evelyn Carter, and a handful of other seasoned investigators. As their rescue vessel approached, the Providence Dawn loomed like a ghost against the horizon. The ship was in pristine condition. No signs of damage, no distress flares, no lifeboats missing. Yet, the crew was gone. The boarding party climbed onto the deck, greeted by an unnatural stillness. The Providence Dawn should have been bustling with activity, voices echoing through the corridors, footsteps against the metal floors. Instead, there was only the sound of the wind howling through the ship's rigging, a mournful lament that sent shivers through the group. Lawson was the first to break the silence. This isn't right. A ship doesn't just abandon itself, Dr. Carter finished, glancing around. Her eyes lingered on the doorway leading below deck, where shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. The team moved forward cautiously, their boots clanking against the deck. They checked the bridge first. The control panels were still active, the ship's course set towards its intended destination, a port it would never reach. The captain's log was open, but the last entry was chilling. Something walks among us. We see it at night, lurking in the shadows. It is not human. It is not of this world. If we disappear, do not come looking. Silence swallowed the group. Captain Mathers exchanged uneasy glances with Lawson before exhaling sharply. We search the ship, top to bottom. Find any evidence of what happened here. They split into smaller groups, checking the living quarters, the engine room, the storage bays. But everywhere was the same, untouched, as if the crew had simply walked off the ship mid-task. Beds were unmade, meals left uneaten. A coffee cup sat half full on the table in the break room, its surface long since gone cold. Then they reached the lower decks. The air was heavier here, thick with a strange, briny stench that did not belong. The walls, once white, bore streaks of something dark, almost black, dripping downward as if the ship itself had begun to bleed. Dr. Carter knelt, running a gloved hand over the substance. It wasn't paint. And it wasn't rust. Blood. Lawson asked hesitantly. Dr. Carter shook her head. Not exactly. It's something else. Then came the noise. A distant, guttural sound, reverberating through the metal hull. It was not the creak of a ship settling. It was a voice, layered with something deeper, something ancient. Leave. The team froze. The sound had come from the darkness beyond their flashlights. A presence, unseen but undeniably there, watching, waiting. Then the lights flickered. Lawson cursed under his breath as he fumbled with his flashlight, its beams sputtering in and out. Captain Mathers steadied his nerves and gestured for them to move back. But then, footsteps. Rapid, erratic, echoing from the shadows ahead. Something was running toward them. And it was not human. The footsteps pounded against the metal floor, growing louder with each passing second. The team's flashlights darted frantically through the darkness, but they found nothing, only shadows stretching like claws along the narrow corridor. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the sound ceased. Silence pressed down on them, thick and suffocating. "Did you see it?" Lawson whispered, his voice barely audible. Dr. Carter shook her head, gripping her flashlight like a lifeline. "No. But it was close." Captain Mathers swallowed hard, pushing down the growing unease gnawing at his gut. "We move. Now." The group pressed forward, deeper into the ship's bowels. The air grew colder, the walls slick with moisture. A rhythmic dripping echoed through the corridor, the source unseen. The further they went, the more the ship felt wrong. The angles of the walls seemed unnatural, subtly distorted, as if the vessel itself was shifting around them. Then they reached the mess hall. It was here they found the first real sign of the missing crew. Chairs were overturned, trays of rotting food scattered across the floor, and in the center of the room, a circle of salt had been drawn. Inside it lay a knife, its blade crusted with something dark. Words had been scratched into the metal table beside it. "It does not sleep. It waits." A cold shiver ran down Dr. Carter's spine. They tried to protect themselves. Lawson exhaled sharply. "From what?" Before anyone could answer, the ship lurched violently, as if something massive had slammed into it from the outside. The walls groaned, the metal screaming under immense pressure. Then, from the darkness beyond the mess hall, a voice whispered, low, inhuman, and hungry. "You should not have come." The ship groaned, metal straining under an unseen force. The team stood frozen in the dim glow of their flashlights, their breath shallow, their hearts pounding. The voice had come from the corridor ahead, a whisper that seemed to seep from the very walls. Then, the lights flickered again. Captain Mathers clenched his jaw. "Move. Now." The group hurried out of the mess hall, their footsteps echoing through the empty ship. As they reached the next corridor, a shadow shifted at the edge of their vision. Something was watching them. Dr. Carter turned, shining her flashlight into the darkness. For a brief second, she saw it, a shape, impossibly tall, its form flickering like static. And then it was gone. A wave of nausea rolled over her, and she gripped the nearest railing to steady herself. "Did you see that?" Lawson nodded, his face pale. "Yeah. And I don't think we're alone." The ship groaned again, the deep vibration rattling through the metal framework like the death throes of a colossal beast. The air had thickened, heavy with an unnatural stillness that pressed against their chests. Something beneath them, something unseen, was shifting. Captain Mathers motioned for the team to press on, his knuckles white around the grip of his flashlight. The descent continued into the ship's lower levels, where the cold was suffocating, the moisture on the walls dripping like sweat from the vessel's steel skin. "Keep close," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter had stopped talking altogether, her normally analytical mind struggling to process the reality unraveling around them. She kept glancing over her shoulder, certain that the shadows were moving when she wasn't looking. Then they heard it. A deep, rhythmic thumping. Not machinery. Not something mechanical. It was wet, organic. A heartbeat reverberating through the ship itself. Lawson tightened his grip on his gear. "That's coming from below." Mathers nodded grimly. "Cargo hold. Let's finish this." With each step downward, the sensation of being watched intensified. The air was thick with decay, the smell of brine and something older, something that did not belong in this world. Their flashlights flickered, the beams struggling against the encroaching darkness. Then they reached the cargo hold. The massive metal doors loomed before them, partially ajar. Beyond them, the darkness pulsed, alive, breathing. The thumping sound was deafening now, a presence pressing against the walls of reality itself. Dr. Carter hesitated. "Captain, I don't think we should." Mathers didn't let her finish. With a deep breath, he pushed the doors open. Inside, the darkness moved. The cargo hold was vast, its walls stretching into a void that their flashlights could not penetrate. The rhythmic, wet thumping came from the center of the room, where something writhed in the gloom. At first, it was impossible to make out. Then, as the light settled on it, reality twisted. A mass of black tendrils, glistening like oil, pulsed and coiled upon itself. It was neither flesh nor shadow, but something in between, something primordial, shifting in and out of existence. It was the source of the heartbeat, the thing that had taken the crew. And it was watching them. The team stepped back instinctively, their bodies screaming to flee, but the doors behind them slammed shut. The ship itself groaned, the walls pulsating as if it, too, had become part of the entity. Then the whispers began. "Join us!" A voice layered upon itself, countless tones merging into one. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Lawson screamed as something latched onto his leg, dragging him forward. The tendrils were fast, intelligent, seeking to consume. The others lunged, grabbing him, but the pull was relentless. His flashlight clattered to the floor, the beam illuminating the remnants of the crew, half absorbed, their faces twisted in eternal horror. Dr. Carter made a decision. She pulled the knife from her belt, the same one they had found in the salt circle, and slashed at the tendrils. The creature recoiled, shrieking, the ship itself convulsing at the sound. Mathers grabbed Lawson and hauled him backward as the mass writhed. "The salt," Carter gasped. "It's afraid of it." There was no time to question why. They ran, retracing their steps, the walls closing in around them. The ship was sinking now, dragged into something deeper than the ocean. The moment they reached the upper deck, Mathers activated the emergency distress beacon. The water surged up through the lower levels, the creature's screech filling the air as the Providence Dawn gave one final lurch. The rescue boat found them hours later, floating in the debris, the cargo ship swallowed by the abyss. There were no explanations. No records of what they had seen. Only silence. And the knowledge that somewhere, in the depths of the ocean, the thing still waited. Listening. Hungry.